Today's story is titled Married by Contract. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain hammered softly against the tall windows of a Manhattan penthouse as Alexander Reed, the 34-year-old CEO of Reed Global Holdings, sat in silence. A single contract lay on the glass table before him. His jaw was tight, his suit immaculate, his eyes distant as if weighing a decision too heavy for words. Across the room, his lawyer cleared his throat. Sir, the board will not extend the merger deadline unless you are married by the end of the quarter. Alexander nodded once. I am aware. His tone was calm, but there was fatigue beneath it, the kind that comes from years of fighting to protect something built from nothing. When the door opened, the sound of hurried heels broke the stillness. A young woman, Emma Collins, stepped in, clutching a folder to her chest. She looked nothing like the women who usually crossed paths with Alexander. She was 26, a florist whose small shop on 7th Avenue had been on the verge of bankruptcy. Her landlord had given her 2 weeks to pay or lose everything her late mother left behind. Mr. Reed, she began nervously, your assistant said you were hiring for an event decorator. Alexander studied her for a moment before sliding the contract across the table. I am not hiring a decorator, he said evenly. I am offering you a proposal. A marriage contract. Emma froze. Excuse me? He leaned forward. I need a wife for 3 months. In return, I will pay all your debts and fund the expansion of your shop. It will be strictly professional. You will attend 5 public events with me, wear a ring, and live at my residence until the contract ends. After that, you are free. Her mouth parted, disbelief flashing across her face. You cannot be serious. Alexander's voice remained steady. I am. I do not have time for romance or negotiation. I need an agreement that looks real, and I believe you are genuine enough to make people believe it. She stared at him, torn between fear and desperation. Why me? Because you have nothing to gain by lying, he said quietly. And I have everything to lose if this fails. The ticking of the clock filled the silence between them. Emma's eyes drifted to the contract, the bold black letters spelling out her name beside his. She thought of her mother's old shop, the smell of fresh lilies, the warmth that used to fill her small world before debt turned it cold. Slowly, she exhaled. What are the rules? She asked. Alexander's lips curved faintly, almost a smile but not quite. 3 simple terms, he replied. No emotional involvement, no interference in each other's lives, and do not walk away before the gala in December. Emma hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the pen. And if I break one? Then the contract ends, he said. And so does the payment. Thunder rolled outside. The pen touched paper. In that single stroke, 2 lives on opposite ends of the city's skyline intertwined by necessity, not love. As she signed her name, she whispered to herself, this is just business. Alexander watched her with unreadable eyes, knowing that somewhere inside the neat lines of that contract, something far less predictable had already begun. The contract was signed, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any signature on paper. Emma sat across from Alexander, her pulse racing as reality began to settle in. He rose from his chair, the sound of his footsteps crisp against the marble floor. My driver will take you to the penthouse tomorrow, he said simply. The press will expect us to appear together by the weekend. His words were matter-of-fact, professional, yet something about his tone carried an unexpected gentleness. Emma nodded, unsure whether to thank him or apologize for existing in his world. When she finally stepped out of the skyscraper lobby, the night air hit her face like a reminder that she had just sold 3 months of her life. The following morning, her life shifted completely. A black car arrived outside her small apartment, the kind that drew curious glances from neighbors. Inside sat Claire, Alexander's personal assistant, a tall woman with sharp features and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand. "Miss Collins," she greeted, her tone polite but brisk. "Mr. Reed has arranged everything. Wardrobe, etiquette lessons, and relocation to the residence." Emma managed a nervous smile. "I guess this is really happening." Claire gave a faint smirk. "In this company, Miss Collins, everything really happens." The penthouse took Emma's breath away. It was not just luxurious, it was a world suspended above the city. Glass walls revealed the skyline of Manhattan, stretching endlessly under the winter sun. Every surface gleamed, every detail screamed control. Alexander stood near the window, phone in hand, deep in conversation about board numbers and quarterly losses. When he saw her, he ended the call and studied her for a moment. "Welcome home," he said. She hesitated. "It does not feel like home." He nodded slightly. "Neither does it for me." Over the next few days, their lives intertwined in carefully choreographed proximity. They practiced how to smile at events, how to hold hands just long enough for cameras to capture. Publicly, they were a perfect couple. Privately, two strangers sharing a contract. Emma learned to walk in heels without tripping and how to address investors without revealing her trembling nerves. Yet the more she tried to fit in, the more she noticed the quiet cracks beneath Alexander's polished surface. Late at night, when the city slept, she would sometimes hear the sound of a piano drifting from his study. The melody was haunting, tender, nothing like the cold man she met in the office. One evening, she dared to ask. "You play beautifully," she said softly, standing at the doorway. Alexander looked up, startled but not angry. "It helps me think," he said. "Music does not ask questions." She stepped closer. "And yet, it sounds like you have a lot of answers hidden in it." He gave a faint smile that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. "Some answers are better left silent, Miss Collins." She wanted to respond, but the distance between them, both physical and emotional, remained like glass. The first public test came sooner than expected. The Reed Global Foundation hosted a charity gala, and the guest list included half of Wall Street. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne, and the sound of whispers. Emma's heart pounded as Alexander placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Smile," he murmured, "and remember, they believe in what we show them." Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. When one journalist asked how they met, Emma froze. Her mind went blank, but then Alexander stepped in smoothly, his arm still around her. "She sold flowers outside my building," he said with a small smile. "I bought one every morning until she said yes." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Emma turned to him in surprise. The lie was warm, harmless, almost beautiful. "You are a quick thinker," she whispered. "It is called survival," he replied. But when their eyes met under the soft light of the chandeliers, something unfamiliar passed between them, something not written in any contract. Later that night, as they rode the elevator home, Emma caught her reflection beside his in the mirrored wall. They looked like a real couple. And that realization scared her more than anything. She whispered, almost to herself, 3 months is a long time to pretend. Alexander's voice was low, steady. "Yes," he said, "but sometimes pretending is the only way to learn what is real." The elevator doors opened, and for a brief moment, she wished the ride had lasted longer. By the second week, Emma's world had changed so completely that she barely recognized herself. The headlines called her the mysterious wife of Manhattan's youngest CEO, while strangers on the street whispered her name with curiosity. Inside the penthouse, life moved in a rhythm of quiet luxury and unspoken boundaries. Each morning, she would find Alexander already awake, reading financial reports while sipping black coffee from a porcelain cup. He would greet her with a polite nod, always formal, always distant. Yet sometimes, when he thought she was not looking, she caught him glancing at her reflection in the window, his expression unreadable. Claire, ever the efficient assistant, managed their schedules with military precision charity luncheons, board dinners, and photo opportunities carefully staged to maintain their illusion. Emma followed instructions, smiled at cameras, and played her part. But behind closed doors, her laughter began to return. She started filling the cold apartment with small signs of life: fresh flowers on the counter, warm tea instead of whiskey, soft piano playlists instead of silence. One evening, she even cooked. The smell of roasted garlic and herbs drifted through the penthouse, drawing Alexander out of his office. He paused in the kitchen doorway, surprise flickering across his face. "You cook?" he asked. "I try," she said, laughing softly. "It is cheaper than hiring a chef." He leaned against the counter, watching her stir the sauce. "You do not need to worry about money anymore, Emma." She looked up. "That is easy for you to say." For a moment, he said nothing, only studied her with a strange tenderness. "Maybe," he finally replied, "but worrying is what keeps us human." Dinner that night was awkward and quiet at first, but as the conversation unfolded, they found themselves sharing pieces of their past. Emma talked about her mother's flower shop and how it smelled like home even when they had no money for heat. Alexander spoke of his parents' early deaths and the weight of inheriting an empire built on expectations. "People think power fixes everything," he said quietly, turning the stem of his wine glass. "But it only makes you lonelier when it does not." Emma listened, her heart softening. Beneath the sharp suits and confidence, there was a man who had never been allowed to rest. Later that night, unable to sleep, she found him again in the music room. The piano keys glowed softly under his fingers. She sat nearby, silent, letting the melody wash over her. When he finished, he turned to her and said, "You are not what I expected." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." The days that followed blurred into something dangerously close to normal. They laughed at the same jokes, shared late-night coffee, and began to anticipate each other's moods. For a man who built walls, Alexander seemed to lower them, piece by piece. But just as comfort began to bloom, reality reminded them that this was still a performance. At a weekend charity auction, Alexander's ex-fiancée, Victoria Hale, appeared without warning. Elegant, confident, and cold, she approached them with a smirk. "Alexander," she purred, "you did not tell me you remarried so quickly." The cameras nearby turned immediately, catching every word. Alexander kept his composure, sliding an arm around Emma's waist. "You are not on the list, Victoria," he said smoothly. "Then it seems I am full of surprises," she replied, her eyes scanning Emma from head to toe. "Tell me, dear, how does it feel to play Mrs. Reed for the season?" Emma's pulse spiked, but Alexander's hand tightened gently around hers. "Careful," he warned softly, his voice low enough for only Victoria to hear. "This is not a game you can win." The encounter rattled Emma. That night, as they returned home, she paced by the window, anger mixing with humiliation. "She knows," she said, voice trembling. "She knows it is fake." Alexander stood still, his expression unreadable. "Let her think what she wants. The only way this works is if we act like we do not care." She turned to him, frustrated. "But I do care, Alexander. This is my name, my face in every headline." For the first time, his composure cracked. "You think I do not know what that feels like? Every mistake I make becomes a headline. Every rumor becomes a truth. That is the cost of my life, and now it is yours too." The room fell silent except for the city humming far below. Emma blinked back tears, realizing how trapped they both were, him by duty, her by circumstance. Still, beneath the anger, something shifted. For the first time, they were no longer acting. They were two people standing on the same side of a fragile lie that had started to feel dangerously real. The tension between them lingered like fog after a storm. For the next few days, Emma and Alexander kept their distance, exchanging only polite words at breakfast or brief nods before company events. The illusion of perfection continued for the public, but inside the penthouse, silence had replaced laughter. Yet something about that silence was different. It was not anger anymore, it was awareness. One evening, Alexander found Emma on the balcony, barefoot in her nightdress, staring out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. The wind tugged gently at her hair as she hugged her arms around herself. "You will catch a cold out here," he said softly. She turned, startled. "I could not sleep," she admitted. "It is strange, living in a place so high above everything, but still feeling small." He stepped beside her, his gaze following the lights below. "That never changes," he said. "No matter how high you climb." For a while, they stood in silence, the city's heartbeat echoing between them. Then she asked quietly, "Why did you really choose me, Alexander?" There must have been others who would have said yes, without hesitation. He hesitated before answering, "Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a prize." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, something fragile but powerful began to form, a connection neither of them had planned for. The following week brought another event, a private dinner for potential investors. Alexander had asked her to attend as his wife, but this time it felt different. He no longer corrected her when she spoke freely. He even smiled when she made a small joke about business meetings feeling like funerals. After the dinner, he walked her to the car, his hand resting lightly on her back. "You did well tonight," he said. "You make people feel comfortable." She looked at him, her voice soft. "Even you?" He did not answer, but the flicker of warmth in his eyes told her everything. That night, they shared their first real laugh in days, and for a moment, the world outside their contract disappeared. But peace never lasted long in Alexander's world. The next morning, headlines exploded across every business channel. Anonymous source claims Alexander Reed's marriage is a hoax. Paparazzi swarmed the building, and the board demanded explanations. Inside the penthouse, Claire stood rigid as Alexander scanned the printed article, fury tightening his jaw. "Who leaked this?" he demanded. Claire's expression faltered. "Victoria Hale has been speaking to the press." Emma's stomach dropped. "She is trying to destroy you." "No," Alexander said grimly, "she is trying to destroy us." Within hours, the story became a feeding frenzy. Commentators speculated about the legitimacy of their marriage. Some called Emma a gold digger, others accused Alexander of staging a publicity stunt. The pressure was unbearable. When Emma's shop was vandalized and she received threatening messages online, she finally broke. "I cannot do this anymore," she said, tears filling her eyes. "This was supposed to be pretend, but it is ruining my real life." Alexander stood across the room, his shoulders tense, his expression unreadable. "If you walk away now, they will win," he said. "They already have," she whispered. "I am not built for this world, Alexander. I do not belong here." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Emma," he said quietly, "do not let them define you. You are stronger than you think." She looked back at him, her heart breaking under the weight of something she could not name. "Then why does it hurt so much to stay?" The answer hung between them, heavy and unsaid. That night, she packed her bags and left the penthouse, leaving behind her dresses, her jewelry, and the contract that had started it all. Alexander watched from the balcony as her cab disappeared into the river of city lights below. For the first time in years, he felt something he could not control: loss. In the days that followed, he buried himself in work, but every empty room reminded him of her. The flowers she used to place on the counter had withered, the piano remained untouched, and the silence had grown deafening. Yet beneath the ache, one truth refused to fade: somewhere between the lies and the signatures, their fake marriage had become the only thing that ever felt real. Weeks passed, and Alexander's life turned into a blur of damage control meetings and silent regrets. Without Emma, the penthouse felt colder than ever. He told himself it was better this way, that their contract had simply run its course, but every morning he found himself glancing at the empty chair across from his at breakfast. The press eventually moved on, but the void she left did not. One night, while reviewing financial reports in his office, Claire entered quietly, holding a folder. "You should see this," she said. Inside were photographs of Emma volunteering at a community garden in Brooklyn. She was smiling, her hands covered in soil, her hair tied back under the spring sun. "She refused the settlement check," Claire added softly. "She said she did not want the money." Alexander stared at the image for a long time. For a man who measured life in contracts and profits, her choice was something he could not quantify. The next morning, he cancelled all his meetings and drove to Brooklyn himself. The garden was small but alive with color rows of tulips, fresh herbs, and laughter from the volunteers. He spotted her near the fence, kneeling to plant seedlings. For a moment, he just watched her, realizing how long it had been since he had seen her at peace. When she finally noticed him, her expression froze. "What are you doing here, Alexander?" she asked cautiously. "You left your world. I thought you would stay there." He took a slow breath. "That world was empty without you." She looked away. "Do not say things you do not mean. We had an agreement. It ended." "No," he said quietly. "The contract ended. The truth did not." She stood, wiping her hands on her apron. "And what truth is that?" "That somewhere between pretending and surviving, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air, fragile but undeniable. Emma blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You do not even know what love means, Alexander. You spent your whole life signing deals, not feelings." "You are right," he admitted. "But for once, I want something that cannot be bought or negotiated." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft rustle of wind through leaves. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of humiliation and exposure were still fresh. "You think showing up here fixes everything?" she asked. "No," he said, "but maybe it is a start." Before she could respond, a commotion broke out near the gate. A man in a suit was arguing with one of the volunteers. "Mr. Reed," the man called, holding up a tablet. "You need to see this." On the screen was a breaking news headline: "Victoria Hale under investigation for corporate fraud and media manipulation." Evidence had surfaced that Victoria had fabricated the entire scandal to destroy Alexander's company. Emma's eyes widened as the truth settled in. "So it was all her," she whispered. Alexander nodded. "You were dragged through the mud because of me." He looked at her, guilt heavy in his voice. "I should have protected you." For the first time, she saw the man beneath the armor, the one who had lost just as much as she had. Slowly, she reached out and touched his hand. "Maybe we both needed to be broken to understand what mattered." He looked at her, hope flickering where there had once been only control. "Does this mean I get a second chance?" She smiled faintly. "That depends. Are there any new contracts involved?" He shook his head, a small laugh escaping him. "No contracts. Just a promise." "Then," she said softly, "you might have one." In the days that followed, the truth about Victoria's scheme cleared their names completely. The board issued a public apology to Emma, and Alexander's company regained its reputation. But he no longer cared about the headlines. One evening, he returned to the garden where it had all started. Emma was waiting by the fence, the sunset turning her hair into gold. He held out a small box, not of diamonds, but a simple silver ring engraved with the words, "No terms. No end date." "I do not want an agreement," he said. "I want a life with you." Her eyes filled with tears as she took his hand. "Then let us start over. No pretense this time." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, neither of them had to act. As the city lights began to glow in the distance, Alexander whispered, "Our story began as a deal, but this is real." And Emma, smiling through her tears, whispered back, "The best contracts are the ones written by the heart." Months passed, and the scandal that had once nearly destroyed their lives had become a distant memory. The garden that had brought them back together had grown into something more than a small community project. It had become a foundation, the Collins Reed Initiative, dedicated to supporting local businesses and providing training for young entrepreneurs. Emma managed it with her characteristic warmth and determination, while Alexander supported it quietly, funding without interference. Their relationship had evolved too, no longer an arrangement of convenience but a partnership built on respect, understanding, and a shared vision. Yet, as their love deepened, new challenges emerged. Alexander was offered a major international expansion for Reed Global, a deal that would require him to spend months overseas. He hesitated to tell Emma, knowing what distance could do to two people who had fought so hard to be together. One evening, as they closed up the garden, he finally spoke. "Emma," he said carefully, "there is something I need to discuss." She looked up from a tray of seedlings, her hands still dirty with soil. "That tone does not sound like good news." He smiled faintly, but it did not reach his eyes. "It is an opportunity. Singapore. New contracts, new markets. It would be 6 months, maybe longer." She froze, the spade in her hand hovering above the dirt. 6 months? He nodded. "I would come back whenever I could. But it would be a lot of travel." She forced a smile that did not quite hold. "You have to go, Alexander. It is what you do." He stepped closer. "It is not what I want to do. Not if it means losing what we have." She touched his arm gently. "You will not lose it, but you cannot stop living your life because of me. You once told me that fear builds walls. Maybe now it is time to trust that we are strong enough without them." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, though the thought of leaving her felt like walking away from air itself. The next morning, he left for Singapore, promising to call every night. At first, the distance was bearable: messages, late-night video calls, and constant updates. But as weeks turned into months, the time zones blurred, and silence crept in. Emma tried to stay strong, focusing on the foundation, organizing fundraisers, and expanding programs. Yet sometimes, when she walked through the garden alone, she would catch herself whispering his name to the flowers, as if they could carry it across the ocean. One evening, while preparing for the foundation's anniversary gala, she received a call from Claire. "Emma," Claire said urgently, "turn on the news." The screen flashed with breaking headlines. Reed Global accused of corruption and tax evasion. Emma's heart dropped. Reporters swarmed the airport, footage showing Alexander being questioned by authorities. "This is impossible," she whispered. "He would never." "We know," Claire interrupted. "It is a setup. Someone inside the company leaked falsified documents." Emma's mind raced. "Victoria is gone. Who would do this?" "That is what Alexander is trying to find out," Claire replied. "But they have frozen his accounts. He cannot even leave the country until the investigation clears." Emma did not hesitate. Within 24 hours, she was on a plane to Singapore. When she arrived, she found Alexander exhausted, surrounded by stacks of legal files and unanswered messages. His tie was loosened, his eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. When he saw her, disbelief flickered across his face. "Emma? What are you doing here?" "I told you," she said, stepping closer. "We are a partnership. You do not fight this alone." He shook his head. "It is too dangerous, Emma. Whoever did this wants to destroy everything." She looked at him firmly. "Then they will have to go through me first." For days, they worked side by side, tracing emails, phone logs, and financial transfers. It was Emma who noticed a Paterna-forged signature that did not belong to Alexander but to his chief financial officer, a man he had trusted for years. Together, they gathered the evidence, and when the authorities reviewed the documents, the truth finally surfaced. The charges were dropped, the company's name cleared, and the traitor arrested. When it was over, Alexander turned to Emma, his voice hoarse. "You crossed an ocean for me." She smiled softly. "You once built an empire for everyone else. I just did the same for us. That night, as the city lights shimmered beyond the hotel balcony, Alexander took her hand. "I used to think love made me weak," he said. "But you proved that it is the only thing that keeps me standing." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "Then promise me something," she whispered. "No more contracts. No more running." He nodded, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Only promises," he said. "And this time, I intend to keep every one of them." When Alexander and Emma returned home to New York, the city felt different. The skyline shimmered with the same silver lights, but this time it did not look cold. Their trials had stripped away everything that was superficial, leaving behind something stronger, something real. Reed Global's board welcomed Alexander back as a hero, but he no longer carried himself like the untouchable CEO he once was. He had changed. He smiled more, listened more, and for the first time in years, he left the office before midnight. Emma noticed it the most. One afternoon, as she arranged flowers in the foundation lobby, she felt arms circle gently around her waist. "Do you know what today is?" he asked softly. She laughed. "Wednesday. Our anniversary," he said. "Not of the wedding, but of the day you threw dirt at me in that garden." She turned, laughing harder. "I did not throw dirt at you. I was planting." "You hit my shoes," he said. "I still have proof." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes easily when pain has already been survived. But that evening, as they prepared to attend another gala, the past found its way back to them. A former investor approached Alexander with an offer that promised billions but required a clause that would outsource thousands of employees overseas, cutting jobs at home. It was legal, profitable, and completely against the ethics Alexander and Emma had built their new foundation upon. "If you sign this, the company's value triples overnight," the investor said confidently. "Everyone wins." But Emma saw the flicker of conflict in Alexander's eyes. Later, in the car, she spoke quietly. "You already know what you are going to do." He sighed. "If I refuse, the board will call me a fool. If I agree, I become the man I used to be." She reached for his hand. "Then let them call you a fool. I married that fool once, and I would do it again." Her words made him smile, but the weight of the decision lingered. The next morning, he walked into the boardroom where the investor and executives waited. Cameras flashed, reporters speculating on what choice he would make. Alexander looked around the room, at the faces of the people who had stood by him, and then at Emma watching from the doorway. "Reed Global was built on contracts," he said, his voice steady, "but I have learned that integrity is the only one worth keeping." He picked up the pen, then set it down deliberately. "I will not sign away our people for profit." The room fell silent. The investor's smile faded. "You are making a mistake," the man hissed. Alexander met his gaze calmly. "Perhaps. But it will be my mistake, not theirs." The story made headlines again, but this time it was different. CEO refuses billion-dollar deal to protect workers. The same media that once tore him down now called him the man who chose people over power. When he returned home that night, Emma was waiting by the piano. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," he corrected. She smiled, her eyes shining. "You finally broke the last contract." He kissed her forehead gently. "The only one left is the one I made with you," he said. "And that one is forever." Autumn came early that year, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. The garden Emma and Alexander had built together bloomed one last time before the cold returned. It had been nearly a year since their reunion, and everything about their lives seemed to have settled into rhythm. Reed Global had stabilized under Alexander's leadership, the foundation had expanded to 3 new cities, and Emma's flower shop, once a small corner store, had become a symbol of resilience. Yet, beneath the calm, both of them sensed that their story was far from over. One evening, as they closed the shop, Alexander appeared at the door, wearing the same soft smile he had the first day he asked her to marry him for real. "You have that look," Emma said, raising an eyebrow. The one that means you are about to propose something dangerous. Dangerous, yes, he admitted, stepping closer, but not in the way you think. He handed her a folder tied with a satin ribbon. Inside were plans for a new community hub, a place that would combine her foundation's mission with art and education programs for children and families. I want to name it the Garden of Second Chances, he said. A place for people who need to start over just like we did. Emma looked at the sketches, her throat tightening. You mean a real legacy? He nodded. No contracts. No conditions. Just something good that will outlive us. She smiled through tears. Then I guess I will have to say yes, again. Months passed as they worked side by side, transforming an abandoned warehouse into a space full of color, light, and hope. The grand opening drew hundreds of people, from former employees of Reed Global to families who had benefited from the foundation's work. Reporters gathered again, but this time the story was not about scandal or contracts, it was about compassion. When Alexander took the stage to speak, Emma stood just a few feet away, her eyes locked on him. A year ago, he said to the crowd, I believed success was measured by power and numbers. But the woman standing beside me taught me that true success is measured by the lives we touch. This garden exists because of her faith when I had none, her strength when I was weak, and her love when I thought I did not deserve it. The audience erupted in applause, but Emma barely heard it. Her heart was pounding as Alexander turned toward her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I asked you once to marry me for business, he said. Then again for redemption. Now, I want to ask you for forever. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he knelt down on one knee. Emma Collins, will you be my wife? No contracts, no expiration date, just love? Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, yes, 1,000 times yes. The crowd cheered, petals from her own flower arrangements falling like soft rain around them. As they embraced, she whispered against his shoulder, you really do not know how to stop making headlines, do you? He smiled. This one, I think, I can live with. That night, as the lights of the new center glowed behind them, they walked hand in hand through the garden. The air was cool, the stars scattered above like promises yet to be kept. For the first time, there were no secrets, no scripts, and no signatures, only two people who had found the courage to rewrite their story on their own terms. A year later, the world had changed again, but this time it was quieter. The Collins Reed Garden of Second Chances had grown into a sanctuary filled with stories of renewal. Every morning, sunlight streamed through glass panels onto walls covered in painted handprints, each one belonging to someone whose life had been touched by Emma and Alexander's work. On the anniversary of the garden's opening, Emma arrived early, her hands full of fresh lilies. She arranged them in the center courtyard, pausing to breathe in their fragrance. The sound of familiar footsteps echoed behind her. You are up early, Alexander said, slipping his arms around her from behind. Habit, she replied, leaning into his chest. I like to see the day begin here. He kissed her temple. You created something beautiful, Emma. She smiled. We did. Together. They walked slowly through the rows of plants, greeting volunteers and families who waved as they passed. It still amazed Emma how far they had come, from a paper contract born out of desperation to a love written into every heartbeat of this place. When they reached the far end of the garden, Alexander stopped and turned to her. Do you remember what you told me that night at the penthouse? He asked. She tilted her head. Which night? The night you said pretending is sometimes the only way to learn what is real. She nodded softly. I remember. He smiled. You were right. We pretended to be a couple for the world, and somewhere in the middle of that lie, I found the truth. She touched his cheek. Maybe that is how love works. It sneaks in when you least expect it. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, guests began to gather for the celebration. Alexander took the stage again, this time with Emma standing beside him, her hand in his. A few years ago, he began, I believed contracts could control life, that everything worth keeping had to be written and signed. But she proved me wrong. The only promises that last are the ones you live by every day. He looked at her with quiet reverence. I do not know where this road will take us, but I know I will walk it only with her. The crowd applauded, but the moment felt intimate, private, as if the noise faded around them. After the ceremony, they lingered as twilight fell over the garden. The fairy lights twinkled overhead, and the city beyond seemed distant, softened. Emma turned to him and said, "You know, if someone told me years ago that a contract would lead me here, I would have laughed." Alexander smiled. "And now?" "Now I know some deals are meant to change your life forever." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, the original marriage contract, yellowed at the edges. "Do you remember this?" She nodded, eyes wide. "You kept it?" "I did," he said. Then, with a lighter flick, he set it aflame in a nearby fire bowl. Together they watched as the paper curled into ash, the wind carrying away the last trace of their past bargain. "No more contracts," he whispered. "Only trust." Emma smiled, her fingers intertwining with his. "Only love." As the firelight danced across their faces, Alexander drew her close, and for the first time, there was nothing left to prevent no headlines, no doubts, no lines to sign. Just two souls who had rewritten their destiny. Above them, the sign on the entrance gate glowed softly in the night breeze. Love is not an agreement. It is a choice renewed every day.